Well,
hi, Kevin. Very nice to have you.
how are you, Luba? How are we doing?
We are good. So let me set the stage for what we're talking about today, and I'll hand it over to you, and you'll do your intro
Okay, great.
because it's so amazing. I don't think I can do justice, so I'll let you do it. Uh,
I know about
the
that.
the context for our conversation is, in general, I talk a lot about reducing stress in corporate America,
hmm hmm
especially these days because due to the pandemic and many different various reasons, the stress is high rocket. And with the stress, other things come into the picture that I think, should talk about a lot and often in hopes that we can help folks. And I'm talking about mental health. And I would love to hand it over to you now to do the intro and tell us what you do and how you help folks.
Okay. Drum roll. No, no drum roll. Okay, so I am a wellness transformation coach. What is that? Well, I've been in the personal training business since I'm going to date myself. I don't feel this old, but I've been in the personal training business since 1987, believe it or not. So that was my first client. Now, over time, personal training switched into what I call performance training. So I'm not a bodybuilder. We do performance coaching, which is more functional strength training, which became very popular in the 90s before TB therapy and all that other stuff. So we use bands, medicine balls, and basically making people functionally strong so they can do things on a daily basis, as well as I'm a martial artist. Now, to step back for a second, I may look like an athlete, but I'm not. I was the kid that stunk at every sport, as you know. My first book always picked last. I was bullied constantly, and then I had a very intense life-changing event. My dad, this is his ring, died of alcoholism at 48, which again has to do with stress. Great guy, just drank too much. Thank God a uncle of mine got me into martial arts, and I've been spent 44 years in martial arts. And martial arts is a good barometer for stress and how to reduce stress as well. Fast forward, I get my degree in exercise physiology. Never expected it to. I'm a low B. Okay, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, but I am the hardest working, as my professor told me. Then I luckily got involved with the UFC, Ultimate Fighters, which I was ended up being the strength coach of 15 UFC fighters, best-selling DVD series, etc., etc. Unfortunately, at the
Now
same
you're dating yourself. When you mentioned DVDs, you lost half of the audience, probably, at least on my LinkedIn.
gone,
But all
gone.
right.
And we launched these. I appreciate that. We launched these DVDs in the shoestring. Never expected it to take off. I was writing at one point. There was 9 MMA magazines. I was writing for 15 for 5 of them, and my articles and my certifications were going everywhere. Lo and behold, nobody knew this. My marriage was falling apart. My wife also got into the throes of alcoholism, and then fast forward 5 years ago, I got divorced. What happened during the divorce led me into a deep depression and then eventually attempted suicide twice in 2019. And I literally rebuilt myself, thank God, to McLean Hospital, and came out of that and wrote my second book, There's a Light in the Tunnel, How to Survive and Thrive with Depression. My big push right now is I'm working on my first TEDx, which you are as well. Congratulations. And I've been a very big proponent of ending the stigma with mental illness. So our big push is what's called the 3 pillars for the Berman Kearns, if you can't tell, system. Proper exercise, and I stress proper nutrition, proper mindset programming, and all that ties into stress of everyday life. So I'll hit you with a couple stats because I have my own radio show in WNRI every other weekend, and these are pretty significant. Ever since COVID started, as we got into COVID, the stress level between corporations at home, it's just skyrocketed. And look at teenagers, it's off the books.
It's horrible, yeah.
It's horrible. And it's all almost imposed because of what's happened. And when you look at people that are in prisoners, solitary confinement, which is what happened during COVID, is what they do to prisoners. So people's minds really played games on them. So the Mental Health Alliance states, and this is just last week, it just stated that since COVID, there has been a 500% increase in people looking for mental health worldwide. The WHO, and I think they're low on this one, stated that 792 million people have mental illness. Now, to go further into that, 1 out of 3 Americans have mental illness. 1 out of 3. 11 to 17-year-olds has been the biggest spike in mental illness. And in that group, the 4th leading cause of death, 11 years old to 17-year-old, and this is stats you can find right online, is suicide. Now, I can't live with that. That's why I'm out doing keynote speaking. That's why I wrote the book. That's why we do the fitness. The fitness all ties in because everybody I've spoken to, psychology-wise, they all push. You should exercise, meditation, to eat better. And I always tell people, when people say proper nutrition, I say, well, if you eat a donut, you're going to look like a donut and feel like a donut. Let's face facts. And they're like, what do you mean? What does a donut feel like? I go, that sugar creates the dopamine effect. You can get the same effect out of exercise.
Can I stop you for just a second here, because you bring up a very interesting point. Now, I talk a lot about what makes me the most happy and creative and innovative, and it's about going for walks, and it's skiing, and it's hiking, and it's snowshoeing, it's being outside. But I had a conversation at some point with someone who was depressed, severely depressed, and I would say, let's go for a walk. I guarantee it will make you feel better. But when people get to the point where they cannot get out of bed, how do you persuade people to eat healthier or go for an exercise, even though you know in your gut, and maybe even they know in their gut, that it will help them, but they can't?
Exactly. Luba, it's a very great question because at the end of the day, here's the challenge: perception. Right? We don't know people's perception. So in one of my chapters, it's called the hidden wound. If I break my arm, people go, what happened to your arm? If I have cancer, there's food at my door. If I say I have panic attacks, I say I have suicidal ideation, people go, whoa, we don't want to talk about that. Well, here's the problem. This is no different than civil rights. Back in the 60s, we got to talk about it. This is no different than homosexuals in the 80s. Nobody wanted to talk about it. AIDS. It all has to be talked about. And working with McLean Hospital with their Deconstructing the Stigma, which I'm a part of, they said that this COVID brought the real pandemic out, which is mental health. So those people that are feeling like, well, I can't get out of bed. And I would tell people this, and this is one of my biggest things. We call it the 2 C's in my system and my keynote: commitment and consistency. Be a pain in the butt. Knock on the door, call them. Don't stop. Just don't stop. And the other thing we say to people, look, if you're feeling bad, we call it reach out, reset, recharge. Find what works for you. And even if we can step back from my first book, Always Pick Last, there's the 4S formula for anti-bullying: speak up, stand up, stay together, self-defense. And that relates to mental illness. I tell kids all the time, when we do lectures at schools and colleges, what do you like to do? I like to do this. I like to swimming. I go, great. Get with like-minded people to push you up. Look at people like Bobby Fischer. At 11, he was a master chess player. That was his thing. Me, martial arts. That was I still surround myself with martial artists all the time. So you've got to find what works. And I always tell people, we do these mental health, next month we'll be doing them again, mental health motivational muscle minutes, 3 minutes. I go, look, do something for 3 minutes. Breathe, walk, do something. Change your scenery.
Even if you're in bed and you can't get out of bed, then do breathing while in bed and see if that moves you just a little bit.
I'm a huge fan of the Wim Hof method. I've been using it now for months. Huge fan. My whole thing is, we get the conditioning, martial arts, and yoga. That's what we combine together. Always. I've been doing yoga for 15 years now. I think it's, besides my children, it's one of the best things my ex-wife gave me. I never thought I'd be in a yoga. I used to call it yogurt and be in a yoga class. And what is yoga? Union, mind, body, and spirit. And it's actually, yoga was created because people couldn't sit still with their postures. So now you got moving meditation. So I would tell those people that I can't get out of bed. I can't do this. I can't. Just do something. And then you tell them and go, okay, what did you do today? Well, I took a shower. Okay, well, check the box. I did this. I did that. I go, you need to check the box. Just check those facts and keep moving forward. Get that support network too. Who's going to support you best? Who is it? I don't care if it's your church. I don't care if it's your synagogue. I don't care if it's your family. I don't care if it's your friend, if your spouse. Who is going to not judge you and say, well, what's your problem? Well, you know what? This mental illness is a biochemical change in your brain for some reason, for whatever it is. Trauma. It's trauma. And I mean, on our programs, we bring in like in 2 weeks, next weekend, I'm bringing on Kevin Donaldson, who's a former police officer who was through SWAT. And if you hear his story, I mean, he had the gun in his mouth. I mean, the first responders, the stress level is off the chart. Now, you can sit there and say, well, of course they're under stress. Well, what about the CEO, right? What about the CEO who has the investors? What about the vice president who's answering to the president? The profits are going down. We're losing, or the manager that has 12 of his people are great, 2 of them are not so great, and he has to decide to fire them. I mean, stress is stress, and that's just the way it is. How do we manage it best? And unfortunately, most people will manage stress with drinking, right? Drugs, food. Food is, I always tell people, I go, what is the easiest drug? Sugar. People say tobacco and marijuana is a gateway drug. Sugar is the gateway drug, sugar and caffeine.
I have to say that in general, like I look back, sometimes we do the little bit of a self-reflection on your life and your career. And I look back, okay, how's it that I went from, 132 pounds, to a good 100 and almost 90 pounds. It's like, and you look through, what happened over the years. It's like, okay, well, those 10 pounds happened during the most stressful and challenging, time in my career. Those 10 pounds happened, during my daughter being sick. And it's all about food. Food was something that it's like, it kept my comfortable and kept my sanity intact. And the thing was, I didn't drink. I didn't want to drink. I didn't do drugs. And food seemed like, it's an easy one and it's harmless.
That's the challenge. It's harmless. We think it's harmless. And when we look back at our ancestors, right, we used to spend 1,400 calories a day just looking for food. We can go down to the seasons to get gasoline and a 4-course meal. We used to have to hunt for a food. We sit too much. We do a lot of things too much. Now we sit too much. Like one of the things that we do in our corporate wellness programs is we call it fit to fight. We teach people Thai boxing where they can hit and hold pads. There is nothing more cathartic than hitting a focus mitt and having somebody hold it. As you know, because
I love it.
Yeah, I got to start working together. I've been doing it for years. I can't get away from it. Just can't get away from it. And when I went through my depression, it was funny. Exercise was always it wasn't food, and that's nothing against anybody with food, wasn't alcohol, but exercise was my release, and then it stopped working. So that's why you got to kind of like get committed to, we have a saying, one of my famous sayings, it's a tattoo on my chest. It's called Sumbak Sumbam in Thai, be relentless. Be relentless in the pursuit of your life. You really have to kind of commit to going, I got to keep moving forward. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. And if you don't have the right support structure, it's tough.
Okay. I have one more question for you. And it's extremely important because I struggle with it myself. Not having depression, but having to support folks in general. And I am a very empathetic person by nature. But I think the way I grew up and just in general, if you compare the generations, it's like my grandparents went through World War II, and the stories I've heard, it's like, okay, like they truly, had knew what suffering is, right? It's like I immigrated at the age of 14. I always look back, okay, like I had to work to help my mom pay for rent, and so like there are the challenges. So even though I'm very empathetic, I often, whether it's within my own family or at work when someone is not accountable for some things, I can't help but sometimes, if not say out loud, but think, just, suck it up, like get over it, snap out of it. Because it's just so hard it's like, come on, like, people do think that, like, you have nothing to worry about. Your life is so easy. Do you have anything that you recommend, not to people who are going through depression, but the support system people?
That's a very good question. And I would have to say this to people, perspective. Okay. Perspective. If you're in like your grandparents, World War II, my mother grew up during the Depression, their perspectives is different. So if somebody's feeling stressed out about a certain thing, what's their perspective in this? And I think at the same token, they've got to learn, you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. right? And that's one of the things they teach you in martial arts and yoga. You're in, chair pose and 90-degree heat and you're sweating. And the teacher's going, breathe. I'm ready to kill you. What do you mean breathe? I think you
It
just have
says
to, what's it say?
embracing uncomfortable to achieve unimaginable.
Exactly, uncomfortable. And I think people need to get out of that mindset. I mean, we perseverate, right? And as a human being, what do? We focus on the negativity. I did this, I did that, I did that. And I was talking to my girlfriend about this not long ago. When people say, like, we have a habit, you're right about that. What is that about? I don't need to be validated for I'm trying to help you. I always tell clients this, I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to tell you the truth and be effective. So I think if you push people towards that, when you go, I'm trying to be effective to get you back to, to what you feel normal. And then the other part to remind the people that are, maybe supporting them, go, look, suffering is a choice. Pain is inevitable. You're going to have pain, but they're suffering right now. So how do we get them out of the suffering? And one of my favorite games I play with everybody, I learned from my first therapist, was check the facts. Just check the facts. I agree with you. Sometimes you got to suck it up. And what is suck it up? And I usually tell people, go, instead of saying suck it up, check the facts. Is there a roof over your head? Is the water running? Get to basics, right? Go down to basics. Like one of my favorite exercises is a gratuity journal. And this is something I learned out of Al-Anon from Salty Woman. Write down just five things you're grateful for, right? 5 things.
It's a wonderful habit. And if you don't like writing it down, think it through on your drive, on your walk, on whatever, even while you're in bed, if you're not able to get up, think about what you're grateful for. I talk a lot about that as well.
And it definitely has to do with their mindset programming. And you've flown a lot, I've flown a lot. And I think flying is the ultimate in letting go. You're in turbulence, like, are we going to die? And you're like, you just got to kind of like go and go, what happens, happens. Not simple, not saying it's simple. I said, but what are you going to do? If you panic, what real good is it? So it's almost the same thing. You got to look at the facts and go, okay. And I know people like David Goggins, I use some of his methods. It's a great idea. He'll write down something he's going to call the cookie jar, really tough that he's done. Write it down, put it in the cookie jar. So when he's going through something else, he'll pull it and go, wow, man.
If I did this, then I can do that. Yeah. I actually mentioned in my first book, I call it a library of crap. It's like the more crap happens to you throughout the life, the more resilient you are, because whatever happens next, it's like, okay, have I gone through something even more difficult? If yes, then you know what, it's no big deal. If not, think about it, that it will make you even more resilient going forward. But let me bring it back to the corporate world and reducing stress and the stigma, because men are less likely to actually talk about stress and depression.
Oh yeah.
In your keynote, when you speak to folks in the corporate world, like, what are some of the things that you mentioned to encourage people to open up and seek help and just be open about it?
I appreciate that. And it's a great question. And one of the things I try to impart in people, vulnerability is strength. It's okay to be vulnerable. Men as well. I've seen SWAT operators, 250 pounds, beast, break down, just break down. There was a great movie out there called Fury with Brad Pitt, who's a macho actor, right? And he was a tank commander. And he had been with the same crew in Africa. Now he's with the same crew in Germany. They're going against the battle. They're going to get their orders. And he was the tank commander. It wasn't even a dialogue scene. He went to get his orders, stepped behind the camp with a cigarette, looked around, took a knee and started crying. That one scene calcified, crystallized, saying, look, man, you can be macho, but you know what? Everybody has to take a knee. No warrior doesn't take a knee and isn't touched in some way. So vulnerability is strength, right? Vulnerability, like I think you saw the keynote, the new macho. It's okay to be vulnerable. I'm not saying be a puddle, but say, you know what? It's okay. Any father, I guarantee you, any father talks to me, the minute your kid is born, especially if you have a daughter, I got 2, you lose it. You lose it, as you know, as a mother, it's out the window. And the other thing I say to people too, I go, you can't have north without south. You can't have east without west. And when people say, male and female energy, what's wrong with that? There's no female energy in a male? That's where the empathy comes in, right? That's where the compassion comes in. And then the same thing, you have that warrior mentality and that, that hunter-gatherer mentality too. You have to be able to blend both. So, and I love that quote. I forget who said it. Courage is not the absence of strength. Courage is courage is being able to do what you have to do in the face of fear. Who isn't scared? Everybody's scared,
No, it's very well said. And I think we can just leave it at that. If you are feeling like crying, cry. If you feel like you're not healthy, speak up, reach out for help, and talk about it. Talking about it helps, and don't feel like you being vulnerable is not strength. It is, and we should encourage it and embrace it. And there are so many people that are willing to help. There are people that truly want to help, especially someone who has gone through it, right, and is on the other side. There's
Yes.
nothing like helping someone.
Well, you make an excellent point. Think of disease. Distress equals disease. Most diseases are caused up here. They really are. That's why we push the Wim Hof breathing method, a lot of the yoga breathing method. And one of the things I love from Wim Hof is he says, if you can control your breathing, you can control your mind. I mean, he's tapping into resources that most people, can't tap into. And you and I both know in the corporate world and in the world of humans, we tap into 6% of our brain power. Really? And there's no time, this is a Les Brown quote. You're either in a problem, coming out of a problem, and going to the next problem. One of my famous quotes is, this is life. You're in your rowboat, it's a calm day, and then 30 seconds later, a storm hits and you're bailing yourself out, and then all of a sudden it's calm again. And being able to roll with that, not saying it's easy, is important. I think the other thing, when people are under stress to matter, especially if the depressed, anxiety, and suicidal ideation, remember, you're not alone, you matter. You're not alone, you matter. Because you're a human. And we are a village mentality. We're a tribe mentality. And we're supposed to, like you said, why not talk about it? Share. I think people are so
Because
afraid.
it's embarrassing for many people, because it's the way you were raised, right? Like, you have to be strong. You're a boy. Boys don't cry. I've heard that, throughout my childhood, be a man and stuff like that. So, like, it's very hard to unlearn and get things out of your brain if that's what you've been told all your life. It in all aspects, right? But we're not gonna go into all the aspects out there. Last quick question: if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Simplest way is go to my website, burnwithkearns.com, Kevin at burnwithkearns.com. And I'm old school, like you and I are the same. You know what? 508-404-8503. I pick up my phone. Don't hesitate, to call me, reach out to me, and ask questions.
I forgot to warn you that I'm gonna post it online to thousands of people. So here you go. Now everyone has your cell phone.
Well, and to get back to your other question, to go back for a second, be a man. Well, what is that? What is that? Being a man in the 50s is different than 2023, right?
Yeah.
It's different. And I always throw this out to people. The average age of a soldier in World War II was 19. The average age of a World War II B-17 bomber pilot was 22. Imagine being 22 and having 6 guys and dropping bomb. I mean, I made it out of college when I was 24. I'm like, I couldn't believe it. Okay. I mean, that's kind of scary. So I think every generation has to sit there and go, what's reality and what's up here?
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. And as always, my hope is, if this conversation helps one person, then it was worth having it.
One is better than none.